In Marvel Snap, you will only be paired against other players who are of a similar collection level to you. If you are still collecting from Pool 1, this is a collection level 214 and below, you will only play against people also in Pool 1. This means there's a very definite meta, and I've built all the top meta decks, and we're going to rank them from start to finish, as well as show you some optimized lists that you might want to use. Also, for each of these decks, there's most likely a deck guide, which I've played on my channel, with gameplay and more in-depth guide on how to pilot the deck. First and foremost, we have America Chavez, who is just representing a mid-range good stuff deck. This is just a deck which is just playing good cards, not really worried about synergy. America Chavez could be replaced with Hulk, of course, but I think she's slightly better on this, just because you guarantee to draw her on turn 6. There is a slight advantage. What you'll notice, a lot of these decks in Pool 1 are going to be using a lot of these cards, which is good stuff, because you have a limited amount of options to choose from. So cards like Angela, cards like Nightcrawler, and Ant-Man find their way into a lot of decks. Also, just worth mentioning Enchantress. Enchantress is a really fantastic way to get a lot of cubes. You can play her on turn 6 to shut down your opponent's Iron Man, and a lot of the cards that are very powerful in Pool 1 are ongoing cards. So Enchantress is one of the best tech cards in the game that you might want to include to get some of those juicy 8-cube finishes. Of course, you can play her on turn 6 for that surprise value. Do be warned, if you're also playing ongoing cards, you can remove your own ongoing abilities, and that's going to be a big risk in this particular deck, with Captain America, Iron Man, and Ant-Man all being ongoing, and that's probably a big reason why this deck is just nothing more than decent, I would say. When the game first comes out and it's a starter deck, it's one of the best starter decks, maybe the best, but I would say it gets worse as you go on. Up next we have Apocalypse, which is representing the discard deck. Discard is not a very fleshed out archetype in Pool 1. Apocalypse being the big finisher card. You also have Swordmaster, Lady Sif, Blade, and Wolverine. I would say this is the worst starter deck, Pool 1 deck that you can play. It does get better as you go along. In Pool 2, there's cards like Swarm and Collector, which can make this one better. I would just avoid playing Discard until a later point. And hopefully, Pool 1 Discard gets some buffs in the future. And next we have Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is representing this Kazar deck, where we're just playing lots of 1-drops, swarming the board, and then Kazar is going to be buffing all our 1-cost cards by 1. Blue Marvel is going to be buffing everything by 1, and we can then play Onslaught in the same lane as those cards, which is going to double their ongoing ability. So all of our 1-drops are going to be buffed by 2 by Kazar, Onslaught, and then all our other cards are being buffed by Blue Marvel by 2 because of this combo. This deck is pretty powerful. However, I'm not a huge fan of it personally compared to some of the other more powerful decks. It's playing really heavily into Enchantress because of Onslaught. You're going to be stacking your lane. So I'm not going to put it into the S tier. I am going to put it into Popping Off. However, it is a really, really strong deck. A lot of the 1-drops that you get access to early in the game are just very efficient. Ant-Man, Electric-Org, Nightcrawler, Rocket Raccoon, Squirrel Girl are all really good cards. Rocket Raccoon probably the weakest out of them. But yeah, these are some serious cards. Angela synergizes well with it. Then you get the Wolfsbane for 7 stats for 3 energy, which is nothing to joke about. You could also consider replacing Sentinel in this one, but Sentinel just gives you a nice mana curve where you're playing your 1-drops, you're playing your Sentinel, when you're very rarely going to be wasting any energy. Also, Sentinel, nice synergy with Angela and Wolfsbane, and you just get lots of bodies for your Blue Marvel, but of course it's not going to be getting buffed up by your Kazar. Up next, we have a Dino deck. Dino deck in closed beta was the most powerful Pool 1 deck. However, quite a lot has changed since then. Dinosaur used to just cost 3 energy and 0 stats, and Moon Girl used to be 3 energy and 3 stats. Previously, you could play 2 dinosaurs, for example, on turn 6. And while playing 2 dinosaurs is still a possibility, it is not easily done, because you're going to have to play Moon Girl on turn 4 to get 2 dinos in hand. Then you play 1 dino, and then you play your other dino on turn 5, and there's not on turn 6 rather, and there's not really a smooth turn 6 dino play. You play your dino, and you just have 1 energy. You could maybe play Mantis, and then if your Mantis predict is correct, then you're going to draw a card, and your dinos aren't going to get buffed. But realistically, you might just be better playing the dino and nothing else. So this deck is going to get a lot better into Pool 2. You have cards like Agent 13, which is a 1 energy card, which is adding a card to your hand. You also have the Collector, which is getting a point for every time you add a card to your hand. So the deck does get a lot better. Also, White Queen is actually surprisingly good in this deck. Drawing a copy of the highest cost card in your opponent's hand gives you some turns where you can just play a 6-cost card. And Cable is also a really nice option, as well as Sentinel just popping off in this deck. You'll note there's no 6-cost card. You might be a bit surprised. The reason for that is this 6-cost card is just going to end up in your hand a lot of the time, unable to be used. For example, Onslaught is the most common card I see in this deck. I don't like it at all. It's just going to get in the way, and realistically, you just want to play 2 dinosaurs. The big problem really with this deck is you just don't really have enough consistent ways of drawing cards. Playing cards like Electra, playing cards like Nightcrawler, when you're playing dinosaurs, it's kind of bad because you're just playing a card, one less card from your hand, and therefore 2 less points to your Dino, so it's a bit of a sticky one. For that reason, I actually am going to put Dinosaur into very decent, which is going to surprise a lot of people. A lot of people are going to say this is the best pull 1 deck, but those people are living in the past. I've tried all of these decks, bar one. I haven't tried the Strong Guy deck yet, and I was disappointed with the Devil Dinosaur deck by quite a distance. It can be great, but for me, there's just not enough draw synergy in pull 1 for this deck to be popping off. Up next we have Heimdall, who is representing movement. I'm pretty biased that I'm a big fan of movement, especially in pull 1. It gets weaker the further you go out, the further on in the game you get, because a lot of the other decks catch up, and honestly, movement doesn't get that much better. Pull 2 is maybe where it really shines a little bit more. We've got Miles Morales in here as well, who's the Battle Pass card. If you don't have Miles, do not panic. I honestly don't even think the card is that good. You could replace this card with like a 1-drop, or I think Ironheart is also a nice option in this deck. You might also be wondering why this deck is playing America Chavez. America Chavez is increasing the odds of us drawing all of our combo cards early on, because to start with the game for the first 5 turns, we kind of have an 11 card deck. Therefore, it's increasing the odds of us drawing cards like Multiple Man, Iron Fist, Hulkbuster all together, which are comboing, and we need to develop this Multiple Man early for this deck to really pop off. Therefore, America Chavez early on is increasing the odds of us drawing those combo cards. Now, throughout the course of the game, she's actually decreasing the odds of us drawing every specific card because we're always drawing her on turn 6. However, what that also means is that on turn 6, you've always got a nice play, and a lot of better players will see the Heimdall coming. They're going to know that you're moving all your cards to the left, and they can play around that very efficiently by just like maybe putting loads of points in the middle lane. Or let's say your opponent's got loads of points in the left lane, you've got no points there, but you're winning the middle and winning the right, and then you play a Heimdall by putting all your cards into the lane where your opponent's got like an Iron Man. Like, you just don't want to do that, and therefore America Chavez is a fantastic card to just surprise your opponent. Also, Enchantress can be a nice finisher in this one because we don't have any ongoing cards. I think it's one of the only decks really which isn't playing any ongoing cards, so Enchantress is a great option for sure. I'm a big fan of movement, but it's very difficult to pilot. I would say probably the most difficult deck. I'm going to put it in very decent category. Personally, I think it might be a little bit better than Dinosaur, but I think it's so much more difficult to pilot that I'm going to put Dinosaur above it on average. And I know a lot of people are going to freak out if I say otherwise, but you could also argue that movement's down here, but personally, big fan, but I do admit I'm maybe slightly biased. It's my favorite pull 1 deck. Odin up next for On Reveal. Very similar to the deck you're playing right off the bat with On Reveal. Cards like Ironheart, Wolfsbane, White Tiger. The big introduction to this one, Electra is a nice option with Odin because Odin is repeating the On Reveal of your Electra. But Enchantress is where this is really shining. Enchantress is a top meta card. It is dealing with Dinosaur. It's dealing with Iron Man. It's dealing with Onslaught. It's dealing with Strong Guy, Blue Marvel. All these other decks basically Enchantress is dealing with. And a lot of the time the big downside of Enchantress is you can't replay turn 4. You want to play her on turn 6. Well, with Odin, you can play your Enchantress into your Odin lane. You can remove the ongoing abilities of some cards there, and play some more later. Let's say you Enchantress their Captain America or the Ant-Man, and then they Iron Man that lane. Well, you can then play Odin into it, and again, your Enchantress is going to go through. I think we've got to be honest and say that Odin is the S tier deck from pull 1. I do think that like this mid-range deck starts off better, honestly. And Odin is really difficult to pilot, but I think just once you have all the cards at your disposal, like Electra, Enchantress, there's just a lot of synergies in this pull 1. And moreover, most importantly, this deck is not susceptible to Enchantress, which I do think people should be playing in almost all of their pull 1 decks. It's just such a fantastic way of winning 8 cubes on turn number 6. Up next, we have Onslaught. There was also, of course, an Onslaught in a Blue Marvel deck, but this is a different take, really utilizing Onslaught with Klaw. I know some of you are going to be wondering about Onslaught Iron Man, why I'm not playing Iron Man. You could add Iron Man into this deck for sure, instead of one of these 3-drops. Personally, I don't like playing 2 5-drops, but I could see the argument for playing Iron Man, as then you just have some flexibility. You can either play Iron Man to secure a lane, or Klaw to put stats into another lane. But personally, I'm not a big fan, but yeah, maybe I will admit that it might be better to play Iron Man instead of the Punisher, for example. The idea of the Onslaught deck is you want to try and win, of course, the lane you're playing your Onslaught in, but then you also want to be putting stats into other lanes. So, for example, let's say you Onslaught middle, you can have your maybe your Ant-Man there, your Mr. Fantastic, your Klaw, and your Onslaught. Therefore, you're putting a lot of stats into the middle lane because Ant-Man's getting extra stats. You've obviously just got a big body on Onslaught. But then your Klaw plus Onslaught is putting 12 stats to the right. Mr. Fantastic's putting 4 more stats to the right, 4 stats to the left. That's what's really good about this deck, and that's why I much prefer playing Onslaught with Klaw over Iron Man, because Iron Man's just putting all your stats into this one middle lane. And while it's a fun deck to play, it's really bad in my opinion. It really, really is. Worse than discard, I would say. But this one, this build, again, you might want to consider playing Iron Man and Klaw. I could see the argument and drop the Punisher. This deck is one of the better decks. Again, it's so susceptible, though, to Enchantress, which, again, like this Heimdall deck isn't. We'll put it in popping off. However, if people in pool 1 start using more Enchantresses, like this Heimdall deck's climbing above these other two, right? I think realistically, because, again, pool 1, you're only going to be matching against other pool 1 players. They're going to be less experienced. They're not maybe going to see the value of Enchantress. I don't expect Enchantress to be in the meta as much as she probably should be at this level. So I'm going to put it in popping off, but just be careful of Enchantress. And next we have Spectrum. Spectrum is one of the first 6 drops you unlock. This is the deck I built for Spectrum. We have Cosmo, which is actually a really, really nice card to counter these Odin decks. But it's a very difficult card to use. Unlike Enchantress, it's not an on-reveal, it's an ongoing. So Cosmo is a card which you want to be playing. For example, if you see Kamartage, you want to be playing it into the Kamartage lane. If you see your opponent gearing up for an Odin, if you have initiative, which means if you're going first, you can tell because your name will be highlighted. Whoever's winning, their cards will reveal first. They have initiative. If you can play Cosmo into like the same lane your opponent's playing Odin in, it is an unbelievable card because it's just going to cancel the on-reveal ability. The problem with Cosmo is it's very, very difficult to use. It's high skill. But in this deck, it's nice because it's ongoing and Spectrum's going to give it +2. Also, we just have a lot of other ongoing cards like Ant-Man, Armor, Colossus, Lizard, Captain America, Khazar. You might want to try and fit some more 1-drops in here as well, seeing as you're playing Khazar. Like maybe like Armor or Colossus could get dropped for some more 1-drops. That would be my main advice for this one if you fancy tweaking it. I think this deck is garbage. I think it's really bad. I don't think it's quite Apocalypse levels of bad, though. Honestly, maybe. I'm going to put it in the meh category. I think it's better than Apocalypse. Up next, we have Strong Guy. Now, this is the only deck at the time of recording that I have not played. However, back in beta, in closed beta, Strong Guy was the top meta pool 1 deck outside of Dino. Dino Nova was super broken, but outside of Dino Nova, Strong Guy was like the strong second one. It's the first deck I ever got to Infinite with before Dino became super meta back in closed beta. Strong Guy is, if you're not familiar, if your hand is empty, gaining 6+ power. So that's 10 stats for 4, which is definitely above curve. You'll note we're not playing any 6 drops in this deck. That's because we want to be emptying our hand. We have a very low mana curve. Bishop is another card which synergizes very well with this. When you play a card, this gains +1 power. So you want to play Bishop on turn 3, play a bunch of your 1-drops after that, hopefully into your Angela row. Then buff them all up with Khazar. Play your Iron Man for big stats in a lane and your Strong Guy goes through. You've also got Blade in this deck, which is going to be discarding a card in your hand, helping to empty your hand with your Strong Guy. Let's say you don't draw Bishop until turn 6. Then you might play like Iron Man, Bishop. Iron Man and Blade on turn 6 to discard the Bishop. Therefore, your Strong Guy goes through. I think this deck is probably pretty damn solid. Again, I haven't played it, but I'm going to put it in the decent category with like the mid-range deck, which again is a real serious deck. So if you get this Strong Guy early and you have access to Blade, I think Blade is like going to be a really important card for this. Give this one a spin. That is my tier list of the meta from pool 1. As it stands, again, if Enchantress becomes more popular, I would actually be bumping Heimdall up a bit. I think a lot of people will be surprised, and also the mid-rangey deck, right? I think a lot of people will be surprised for me to see Devil Dinosaur here, but I really do not think this deck is that good in pool number 1. So susceptible to Enchantress, and there's just not enough card draw. Apocalypse, I would just avoid. Spectrum is also kind of garbage. These two decks, I think you could make a case that they're better. Honestly, again, if Enchantress becomes meta, these become better. Maybe not this one so much. Strong Guy is like the dark horse, really. Movement's really good, hard to pilot. Onslaught, good, super susceptible to Enchantress. Blue Marvel Kazoo, pretty good, not the best. Odin, just very difficult to counter, very solid, very consistent, lots of surprise value with cards like Ironheart, White Tiger, where you can get those surprise 8-cube victories. Also, Enchantress synergizes really, really well with this deck. Odin is the solid tier 1 deck at the end of pool 1. Play Odin if you want to just farm, if I were you. But lots of good options here. Even Apocalypse, even though it's in the dead category, it's not that bad. You can definitely win games with it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you watched this far, the keyword for today's video is Cosmo. Cosmo, because Cosmo is a Chad. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. See you on the next one.